You know what I love about Dan Campbell? He makes this job easy because he just tells it like it is. And whether it's complete honesty, whether it's not, it doesn't matter because he says it. And it makes life so much easier on this side of things. It really, really does. So I want to talk a little bit about the very clear plan that Dan Campbell laid out, and they talked about exactly why they like the plan for Hendon Hooker, the quarterback. And I know we've talked about him a little bit. We've talked about him on a few different videos, but it's always been speculation. It's always been, hey, we think that maybe this year, definitely not, but maybe next year, the year after, he's going to be a very competent backup. And then who knows, maybe even go for a starting role in the future if you don't want to pay Jared Goff or hand him the bag, or maybe Goff's game slides down, or maybe Hooker ends up being a really good quarterback. We don't know. But now what we do know is Dan Campbell has a plan, and it's actually pretty similar. So I'm just going to read you what he said, and we're going to break it down. So he said, we did go into this offseason saying that we wanted to bring in some competition at quarterback. We didn't know exactly where that might be, who that would be at the time, but we did like Hooker. We knew he was coming off the injury, but there was something about him that was appealing. So he goes on to say this, and all this was on the Chris Long podcast. And honestly, it was such a weird platform for Dan Campbell just to be dead honest. Like, you'd think like it would be someone like one of the beat writers or something like that, but this is kind of how it goes sometimes, isn't it? Like, all of a sudden you're like, oh, at this random podcast where not a lot of people are paying attention, or not a lot of Lions fans are naturally going to gravitate toward looking at that, this is where he admits these things. He goes on in much more detail, and he says this about Hooker. He says he's very mature. He looks the part. He has a big arm. He's just got to learn to play in the NFL. He's a pro now, and I feel like the fact that he was older, we all kind of like the fact that he was older. I think you want your quarterback to be more mature. I promise you, I have a lot more things that I'm going to read from him, but we'll kind of go on from there. I like that he was older. They said they like that he was older. We've talked about that on this show. Everybody knocks him that he's 25, and it knocks him and knocks him and knocks him. It doesn't matter. A good quarterback's going to play till he's 37, 38 years old. Like, quarterbacks prove that over and over again. It's one position that you can play later into your career. You really can. And now, instead of having a 21-year-old quarterback that you're going to have to start paying big money at 25 or 26, you have a guy that you don't have to pay big money until he's 30. I think sometimes having such a young, good quarterback, don't get me, I know this is going to sound bad, and you're all going to disagree with me when I say this. Just hold on for a second. Sometimes those massive contracts with those really young players can almost be a burden on a team. And yes, there's Patrick Mahomes. You can pay him $50 million and he's still going to go win you a Super Bowl. Not a lot of quarterbacks can do that. And so you want them to be as mature as humanly possible on their rookie contract. So you're not waiting till they develop that maturity kind of in the last year of their rookie deal. And then all of a sudden they got that maturity, and you got to pay them, and you got to hand them a bag, and you got to basically take them to the bank. All right, here's what he said. I already told you, he's very mature. He looks the part. And then he went on to say, this is a redshirt year for him. He's got to get the leg right first, and then he'll learn under Jared. And then let's see what happens. And the article that I'm reading off of here ends there with what he said, but he also went on to say a couple of more things. He did. And it's actually the most interesting thing. So yes, I love that he said it's a redshirt year. There's no pressure on Hendon. There's no pressure on Jared Goff. And then he said he's going to learn under Jared. Brad Holmes was very clear that they were letting Jared Goff know exactly what they were doing with quarterback, that they were bringing someone in and what the expectation would be. If Dan Campbell's going to come out in the media and say he's going to learn under Jared, that means that Jared is cool with it and he's willing to teach. And just being around someone, you're going to learn, right? Just being around someone, you're going to learn. We know Brett Favre had absolutely no interest in teaching Aaron Rodgers anything, but Aaron Rodgers was able to learn from Brett Favre just by being around him. So even if Goff wasn't full on board on this, it doesn't matter. But then he said, and then we'll see what he's got. And he went on to say, this is the nice little nugget. Whether that's as a backup quarterback or who knows, maybe he ends up being basically really good and he ends up being able to be a possible starter in this league. He's not closing the door. He's not closing the door. And I love that. And I love that this team can be talking extensions with Jared Goff, but they can be honest about the potential future for Hendon Hooker at the same time. There's no reason not to have yourself doubly booked and very successful with both a starter and a backup quarterback if you want to be competitive in this league. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong in planning for two different futures. The future where Hendon Hooker is no good. He doesn't adjust to the NFL. And while we wanted him, the gimmicky offense is what actually won out. And he just wasn't ready to read pro and defensive defenses, pro defenses. I can speak. It's okay. I can speak. And he wasn't ready for the complexities of the NFL. That's the bad end of it. The good, phenomenal. He ends up being phenomenal. I think I had a connection issue there for a second, but he ends up being great, and it gets even better for him. And he ends up being the quarterback of the future. We're not going to get rid of any of these possibilities. We're not getting rid of any of them. We're keeping them around. So that is what I love about this team. They're multiple in so many ways. Look at what we did with our running back room. Everybody was like, Swift and Williams, that was so good. That was so good. That was so good. And then we're like, yeah. And we're fully ready to get rid of Swift and get rid of Williams because we can bring in Montgomery. Okay, we can bring in Montgomery, we can bring in Gibbs, and we can make that running back room more dynamic, more explosive, and younger. You never stop improving. All right, we got rid of Hockenson. We get a second-round pick. Then we end up using a second-round pick on a tight end on a much cheaper contract. Let's see what Laporta becomes. But if he becomes anything close to Hockenson, and instead of making 10, 11, 12 million a year, he's making $1, thank you. Thank you so much. And that is the type of stuff that you can create winning teams. And it's so funny because we hear people talk about, oh, they don't value the linebacker, or they don't value linebacker, they don't value tight end, they don't value running back. Like, that is what people were saying in the offseason. And then it turns out we go spend capital on running back heavily, tight end, and linebacker, because we know where our roster's at and what we have to do. It's good. And now we're finally, this kind of felt like the final piece. And I think D tackle still has some work to do. We finally got there in the quarterback room. Finally. I'm not saying we're there this year unless Sudfeld's the guy, right? He's going to be our backup. He's going to be our backup. And if Jared Goff gets hurt anytime in the first 12 weeks, it's Sudsy. All right. Suds and Bubbles. All right. That's who's coming in. Hooker maybe will be ready by the back quarter of the year, but likely Dan Campbell just said it's a redshirt year for him. So unless he comes out and just lights it up and is by far and away better than anybody thought, he's not going to play this year. You're not going to see him on the field, or unless there's a lot of injuries. So that's okay. That's a good thing. Get excited about seeing him in preseason of 2024. That's what we can look forward to. All right, guys, hit that subscribe button below if you haven't already. Appreciate you watching the videos. Comment below. Become a member of the channel. We got memberships. We've had those for the last month or so. They're starting to trickle in. I think we got like 7, 8, 9, 10 members, something like that. Really appreciate you guys doing that. You can get live shows of us now that we're getting enough. Members only shows, priority response comments, all that good stuff. But go ahead, sign up for that, and we'll see you on the next one.